Hey South Hills, as a church, we have 8 values that define who we desire to be as a collective church and as individual followers of Christ. I think it's important to share these values and what they really mean with all of you. The value I want to unpack today is this: we won't wait for someone else to reach our neighbors. We are not the kind of community that waits around hoping someone else will do it. We believe in taking action because we know that God has placed us right where we are among our neighbors and friends for a reason. It's not just about showing others the love of God. It's about inviting them into their very own relationship with Him. One way we start the process is by investing in the people around us. That's why we are passionate about teaching on the topics that we know unchurched people around us are interested in. We want to speak to the questions and concerns they have in their everyday lives. And we want to make it easy for you to invite them to join you right here on Sundays. We believe that the love and hope we've found should overflow into the lives of those around us. So let's roll up our sleeves, invest into our neighbors, and invite them to experience all that Jesus has to offer. Let's be the catalyst for the positive change in our neighborhoods and beyond.
Emery! Over the head. Can you put your pants on?
Have you seen Emery's bow?
Come on, man. I got pants.
But this time? No, we're not.
Here you go. Where's your other shoe? I got underneath the trampoline. Huh, how'd it get in there? All right, let's go.
The kids.
Guys, let's go.
Every single way.
We're so close. It's Saturday, isn't it?
Yep.
Farts! Well, let's just chalk this up to a trial run, huh? Who wants ice cream?
I hope I'm not alone in this, but I've had a habit of unintentionally like saying and doing dumb things in my life. And so a few years ago, actually it was quite a few years ago, some friends of ours were getting married and we were both going to be in their wedding. In fact, it was a childhood friend of Hansi's, my wife, and they had grown up together, and we had been married for a few years by that point. We didn't have any kids and they didn't have any kids yet, and they were going to get married. And we were living in the Sacramento area and they were living in the Vallejo area. And so we drove down to go to the rehearsal dinner the night before to be a part of the rehearsal. And so we are standing around the church and they weren't there when we got there, and the wedding party's there, and we're just all waiting around. And it didn't seem like out of the ordinary because most weddings or everything about them are late. Like everything's late, everybody's late, everything's running late, things are missing. And so we're just standing, but this was just enormous. Like it's an hour in, we're supposed to start. And so finally, like she comes walking in, and I'm just like, and I've known her a long time, so we're close. I've known her since I was like 12. And so I was just like, started just giving her a terrible, like, finally, what the heck is taking so long? Let's get this thing on the road. And then she just like burst into tears, and the wedding was off, and the whole, like, everything had fallen apart. After I had just like, in front of all of these people, I was just giving her so much grief. And then she like ran out of the church, and everybody just kind of turned and looked at me like it was my fault that they weren't getting married. It was like, I didn't make them not get married. I don't know what you want me to say. It was horrifying. It was awkward. And certainly, obviously, I apologized, and she was very gracious. And it wasn't very funny at the time, but it is something that we all kind of laugh about now. The truth is, we all have those kinds of moments. Maybe you haven't done that particular thing, but where we've said something thoughtless, or we've had, we said something careless, some action, some word, little offenses, little grievances at the experience, that we experience at the hands of one another and the people around us, the people closest to us, certainly the people that you're related to. And while there are some people, and you probably know some people like this, who choose to make mountains out of molehills, where they hold on to some of those kinds of experiences, most of us let go of them pretty quickly, get over them pretty quickly, especially if the person apologizes. But one of the things that's served me well in my life when it comes to people is that I always like assume the best, and I always give the benefit of the doubt. It's just the way that I'm wired. It's the thing that I choose to do in all of my relationships. It's what I do as a boss. It's what I do as a friend. It's what I do with my kids. It's what I do with my wife. It's just the way that I'm wired. That I choose to believe the best, and I always give the benefit of the doubt. My wife can tell you that's just the way that I am in relationships. It actually drives her crazy because she's wired the opposite. She's just like super doesn't trust you. She assumes that you meant to do that. It's because you are a bad person that you did all of that you do not. You got the benefit of the doubt first time, and you're getting it one time. No, after that, you've proven yourself. Like, we're just wired completely differently. But what do you do when the thing that happened between you and that other person isn't a little thing? It isn't just somebody sticking their foot in their mouth. It isn't just somebody unintentionally saying something that was careless or thoughtless. Well, what if it's a big thing? Right? What if it's not just a molehill, it's an actual mountain? When you can't just easily brush it off, when you can't just readily let it go. Because there are those moments in our lives too, right? Like where those places of hurt and pain, where there's wounds and betrayals, where the thing that happened between you and them, it's unavoidable, it's undeniable. There's no pretending that it didn't happen. There's no pretending that it didn't hurt one or both of you, that it didn't change your relationship. It was the time that your mom tried to interfere with or undermine your marriage. Or it was that time that your friend that you'd been there for over and over and over again was nowhere to be found when you needed them. It was the time that you found out that your family that you're tight with, that you hang out with, that you spend a lot of time with, that they don't like your kids. Or it turns out that the one person that you thought that had your back, they'd been supporting you to your face, but they've been talking trash about you behind your back. And part of what makes these moments so crushing is that often we don't see them coming, at least not the first time. And you expected them to be for you, but it turned out that they were actually against you. And those moments really do hurt. They're devastating even. See, sometimes in our relationships and sometimes in our families, like it's that moment where you realize that you're more committed to them than they are to you. That you thought that you were all in. That we're all in it together. And now it feels like maybe they're not. Or at least it seems that way. I mean, it's possible that there's more to it, right? That it's more nuanced, that maybe you're misunderstanding something, but it sure doesn't feel that way. And maybe the ideas or the expectations that you had weren't altogether realistic, but the bottom line is now things are jacked up. And what happened really hurt, and it messed you up, and it messed up the relationship. A lot of times, like those moments are these relationship ending moments. And even if it doesn't end, it marks the moment that the relationship changed, right? It's never the same after that. I'm always surprised. I've been a pastor for a long time. I'm always surprised when I ask people about their family, how many people have someone that they're related to that they don't talk to anymore, that they don't have contact with anymore. And they usually don't want to talk about it. Is that just the way it is? Are there just certain moments and certain breaks and certain rifts in relationships that are just beyond repair? I think if we're honest, sometimes we're not sure we want to repair it because of what happened. Right? When we're like I'm glad they're out of my life so I can turn the page. But then there's also other times when we're like I hate that it has to be this way. I wish we could resolve it. I wish we could fix it. I wish we could go back to before this thing happened. I really want something more, something better out of our relationship for both of us. And honestly, like we have to all just sort of come to terms with the fact that this is a really hard question to navigate. Because there are some people where it actually is healthier for you to love them at a distance, for them to be farther away from you than they were before. My favorite definition of a boundary is the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. And some people, you can love you and you can love them and be real close. And some people, you can only love them and yourself when they are way over there. But there are other relationships where it feels like things could and should be different if you could just figure out how to heal what happened, how to repair things, how to move forward. So there's a story in the Old Testament of a family that was kind of caught in this exact moment. And When you go back and you read the scriptures, if you're kind of new to reading the Bible, when you read the book of Genesis, which is the first book in the Bible, the bulk of the book of Genesis is actually the story of one family. And that's because in Genesis, it's tracing the beginning of the nation of Israel, of God's covenant with his people. And so anywhere that you drop into the story in the book of Genesis, between Abraham and Moses, who comes along in the book of Exodus, anytime you drop into the story, almost anytime between those two people, you're looking at one of several different generations of one single family. And so in this particular part of the story, there's a guy named Jacob, and he's on the verge of trying to reconnect with people in his family that he's been estranged from for a very long time, many, many years. And as you can imagine, if you've ever been through something like that, if you're in the middle of something like that right now, if there's people that you love or related to, somebody that raised you, somebody that you raised, and now there's distance and it's not, like you can feel, you just know that it's intense and it's messy and there's tension around it. And so this is what happens in Genesis chapter 32. Beginning with verse 3, it says, "Then Jacob sent messengers ahead to his brother Esau, who was living in the region of Seir in the land of Edom." When I was reading this week, I'm always interested in some of the names and stuff, and so I did a little research. His brother Esau was living in the region of Seir, and Seir means hairy, which means nothing, but I just thought that was funny because I'm a guy. He lived in a place called Hairy. So he told his messengers, "Give this message to my master, to my brother Esau. Humble greetings from your servant Jacob." So right away, if you're talking to your brother like this, you know it's because something's wrong, because nobody talks to their brother like this. "Give this message to my master Esau. Humble greetings from your servant Jacob. Until now, I've been living with Uncle Laban, and now I own cattle and donkeys and flocks of sheep and goats and many servants, both men and women." That's him going, "I've done pretty good for myself. I have sent these messengers to inform my Lord of my coming, hoping that you will be friendly to me," which I think is just a funny thing to say. Have you ever had those kinds of moments with your family where you know if you're going to see that person or you're going to step into that situation, you got to have the right approach? You got to test the waters. You got to send up some trial balloons. You got to send some people ahead and go, "Hey, what is mom's mood like today? Like, what are they like today? What's happening in the house today? I need to send some texts and find out how, because we'll skip if today's not the right day." Right? And to let them know that you're coming in peace. Where there's tension between you, but maybe like with Jacob, you have hope. Like this is thing, it's sideways, but maybe if we just sort of get together and hash it out, like we can actually fix it. I hope we can figure this out. I'm hoping, like Jacob's like, I'm hoping that you can see that I love you. I'm hoping that we won't fight and hurt each other. At the very least, and this is where he sets the bar, it's a low bar, I'm hoping you'll be friendly to me. It continues in the story, verse 6, "After delivering the message, the messengers returned to Jacob and reported, 'We met your brother Esau, and he is already on his way to meet you,'" which is awesome. If you stop there in the story, this sounds promising. Like he's going to meet his brother, and his brother was already on his way to meet him. I mean, maybe this is providence. This is incredible. This could be a moment. Seems like both brothers want to patch things up. But it doesn't stop there. And continue the second half of verse 6. It says, "After delivering the message, the messengers returned to Jacob, said, 'We met your brother. He's already on his way to meet you with an army of 400 men.'" And Jacob was terrified at that news. And so he did the only thing that made sense to him. He divided his household along with his flocks and herds and camels into two groups. Now, I don't know what kind of drama you have in your family, but this dude is rolling up to a family meeting with an army. Okay, he's loaded. He's ready. He's not going down without a fight. And Jacob's response is both, I think, kind of hilarious and like bare-knuckled reality, but also kind of hurtful depending on which group of people you ended up with, right? Because he divides his family and his household into two groups and all of his stuff. Why? So that if things get out of hand and my brother and his army of 400 start killing people, they'll be occupied slaughtering you guys so the rest of us can get away. That's why he divided them into two groups. And it's like if you're like one of the sons, you're like, wait, like why does Uncle Esau want to kill us? Also, which group am I in? Dad, you put me in the wrong group. I'm in the wrong group. I'm in the sacrificial group. You see your brother in the other group. Why is he in that group? You start just telling all the stuff he's ever done wrong because he doesn't deserve to be in that group. You don't know what he's like, Dad. He's in the wrong group. He's useless. My wife, I didn't know for years and years and years why she did this, but she chose a side of the bed, and I thought it was just random, but it was strategic. And she didn't tell me till after we'd been married for years that she chose the side of the bed that she chose because she wanted me on the side of the bed nearest the door, so if somebody comes in, they attack and kill me, and she escapes. And that's what she said. She said it like that. And I was like, it sounds like you planned this out. Like, you thought about it. You've done some calculations. And she's like, well, there's no sense in both of us dying. I was like, listen, I feel like you're underestimating my ability to, defend myself here. Anyway. Well, what an intense moment between Jacob and Esau. One of the truest verses that you will ever hear from the scriptures, and they're all true, but tell me if this doesn't ring true for you. In Proverbs 18:19, it says this. It says, a brother wronged, and you can just substitute anybody you want in there for brother, but a brother wronged is more unyielding than a fortified city. Disputes are like the barred gates of a citadel. Have you ever been there where one or both of you, somebody got offended, somebody got hurt, something was said, and now boom, you're all closed off. Turf has been claimed. Walls have been built. The defenses are up. They're fortified. You're ready for whatever they can bring at you. You know their arguments. You know their justifications. You know their reasons, and you're not buying it. You're prepared for the attack. And the implication in the way that this verse describes what's going on here in Proverbs is that you're not just defensive either. Like, you got some well-placed weapons in that wall that you've built. You're ready to strike back if you need to. And honestly, if you've ever been in a relationship of any kind that's gotten to that point, it feels impossible to find your way back. How do we make our way back to one another when there's all this noise, all this distortion, all these defenses and walls, all this stuff between us? So this is such a huge moment for Jacob because he's changed and he's grown and he's matured since things went south between them. See, whether you're the offender or the offended, every single offense comes with an opportunity. Comes with an opportunity to grow, to learn, to forgive, to get help, to make amends. Every time somebody offends you and hurts you, you have an opportunity to lean in or to check out. You can get bitter or you can grow and get bigger. And you know what it's like in your relationships when somebody's offended, when somebody's bitter. Things get smaller and smaller and smaller. They move those walls farther and farther out to protect themselves. And the space where there's commonality, the space where there's love and connection gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So yeah, Jacob and his brother Esau, they got beef. Something happened a long time ago, and they haven't talked at all since it happened, much less about what happened. And it was one of those, if I ever see you again, it will be to kill you with an army of 400 people sort of thing. Or at least it was in Jacob's mind. And so let's rewind the tape a little bit and see how it all got started. We've actually looked at different parts of this story before, and we've looked at some of it recently. But I actually want you to see something specific today, and we're going to get to the very end because we've never actually given away the end of the story. So for these two guys, Isaac was their dad, and what happened right towards the end of their dad's life. This is how it played out in Genesis chapter 27. It says Esau, he was the older brother, he prepared a delicious meal, and he brought it to his father. And he said, sit up, my father, and eat my wild game so you can give me your blessing. It was a common experience towards the end of towards the end of life for the patriarch of the family to have a meal and give his blessing before he died. But Isaac asked him, "Who are you?" He was blind, by the way. He didn't have dementia. He says, "Who are you?" Esau replied, "It's your son, your firstborn, Esau." Isaac began to tremble uncontrollably and said, "Then who just served me wild game? I've already eaten it, and I blessed him just before you came. And yes, that blessing must stand." When Esau heard his father's words, he let out a loud and bitter cry. "Oh, my father, what about me? Bless me too," he begged. But Isaac said, "Your brother was here, and he tricked me, and he's taken away your blessing." Now, this doesn't sound like something that seems like that big of a deal to you. I mean, it seems a little shady, but it might not seem like that big of a deal to us, but it was massive. It was huge for them. See, because the blessing of the patriarch at the end of their life, it wasn't just nice words that a father said over his kids before he died. It had real world impact and implication. It affected their finances and their relationships and their future. It was the formal passing of wealth and authority and leadership from the patriarch to the firstborn son, and it was binding. And it's hard for us to imagine all that, but it would be like if your dad built this giant, successful, multi-million-dollar business. It was worth a ton of money, and you were the one that was chosen to inherit it all. Everybody knew. It wasn't like, well, I wonder who dad's going to pick. No, you were the one that was supposed to inherit it all. But at the last second, some family member swooped in, had the whole thing legally signed over to them, took advantage of your dad, took advantage of the people involved, and behind your back, and took over the whole thing right out from underneath you. That betrayal would be really deep. Yeah, partly because of the resources and the finances and the money, of course, but also because of what it would have meant to you to take over that thing that meant so much to your dad. And all the deep, like nuanced relational validation, all the emotional dynamics, all the betrayal stuff that goes on in families, all the identity stuff in terms of how you relate to the people that you love. And that person has hurt you before, but never in a million years did you think that they would be capable of doing something like this. So that is what Jacob did to Esau. So it's no wonder that this was the way that Esau responded. In verse 41, it says, "From that time on, Esau hated his brother Jacob because their father had given him his blessing. And Esau began to scheme, 'I will soon be mourning my father's death, and after that, I will kill my brother.' And so Jacob took off, and that was 20 plus years ago. That moment severed their relationship. Jacob's been carrying that around with him for 20 plus years, the weight and the guilt and the hurt and the regret and the dread and the anger, all just sitting in the pit of his stomach. And I wonder how that affected him in his other relationships, because it had to have. There's no way for it not to. How did it affect him as an employee? Well, you can actually read when he worked for his uncle. You can read about how it affected him. How did it affect him as a friend? How did it affect him as a husband and a father? Because here's what I've learned in my life. You can never outrun your own dysfunction. You can't outrun the stuff that you've done. You can't outrun the past. You can't outrun the stuff that you did to your family, the thing that was done to you. You can't outrun your own dysfunction. We like to believe that we can. We like to pretend that nobody notices how the issues, that we haven't dealt with are impacting us and our current relationships and our current life. But they can notice, and they do notice. They can tell. Just like you notice other people and their bags. You may not have all the backstory, but you're like, man, this person's got a hang up with that, or this person's got a hair trigger with this, or this. Like, you just notice. Oh, what's the saying? It floats around on social media all the time. If you don't heal from what hurt you, you'll bleed on people who didn't cut you. You just will. And it'll just make a mess all over your life. And so I just imagine Jacob, he was like you or I. I just imagine these fights that he gets in with his wife. Just like you or I, it probably wasn't about him and his wife. It was about him and his dad and him and his brother and all that unprocessed, unresolved mess that's just toxic inside of his soul. Have you ever been around somebody and something that's just innocuous, minor, harmless, triggered something in them and set them off, and they either exploded in anger, they exploded and raged, or they just spiraled in depression. They spiraled into pain and hurt. Or closer to home, have you ever been that person? Or that subject, or that phrase, or that question, or that tone, that word, that attitude, that action, it's off limits, because anytime somebody goes there, no matter how innocent it is, you're going to react. You may not even be able to explain why, but suddenly you feel unloved and disrespected and abandoned and inadequate and worthless and invalidated and unimportant and misunderstood and rejected and controlled and just plain not good enough. And so you start reacting to all of those feelings, not what is actually happening in the moment. See, the truth is we all have those kinds of buttons, no matter how wonderful or perfect your childhood or your family were, you have them. There's no way to avoid having them. And when one of them gets pushed, you may not be able to tell which one it was, but you can tell that one was pushed. What do we do? What do we do when somebody pushes our buttons? Our automatic response is like, oh yeah, I know your buttons too. Boop, 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 boop. Because the problem is not my reaction to the thing that you did. The problem is that you did it, is you said it. You're the problem. For the longest time, I felt the need every time that Hansi and I got in an argument that I needed to be the last word. I needed to be the last word. And not to be outdone, she started figuring that out. So she's like, you ain't getting the last word. I'm going to get the last word. So there were times where I would, and it actually started making us laugh. I would go from being angry to trying to figure out how am I going to win and get the last word. And so I would like say something and then close the door and go and leave. Like I was, you can't, not listening. But that's what we do, right? When somebody pushes our buttons, we push back. So many times the person that we're fighting with, they're just a stand-in for the person that we should be fighting with. They're a stand-in for the person that we really have the beef with. But we don't, or maybe we can't. Maybe we don't have the courage. Maybe we don't know how to bring it up. Maybe we don't think it'll be productive. Maybe the thing that happened was 20 years ago and it feels weird bringing it up now. Maybe they're not in your life anymore. Maybe they're dead. One of the things that's true about life and about family and relationships is that what happened before may or may not have been your fault, but what happens next is your responsibility. How you respond in your relationships, the kind of dad, the kind of husband, the kind of father, the kind of mother, the kind of wife, the kind of friend, the kind of employee. It may explain, what happened may explain some things, but it never excuses it. Because what you do next, how you move forward, is your responsibility. We actually see that in the Jacob story. I mean, talk about a rift that feels like it could not be repaired. I mean, Esau vowed to kill him. Like his brother's like, I'm going to kill you. Not just like, you're dead to me. You know, a few months ago, I got in a fight with one of my brothers. I have a whole bunch of brothers. This one I got in a fight with through messaging. Isn't it fun when you get in like a text messaging fight and you're just like, you send it all angry and they can't feel the full weight of what you sent, you know? And so he's pretty hot-headed. And so the last thing he sent to me was, you're dead to me. And then he blocked my number. But Esau took it to a whole other level. He wasn't like, oh, you're dead to me. He was just like, you're dead, period. I'm going to kill you. And so that's what Jacob was going home to face. He's afraid, he's ashamed, but he's kind of done. He's tired of running. He's tired of just the mess. He's tired of all the blaming. And so he's going home to face all of that. See, if we're going to repair a relationship, it actually requires us taking responsibility for our feelings and our actions and not blaming them and trying to change their feelings and their actions. Because that's what we do, right? I'm sorry that you're an idiot. I'm sorry that you took it wrong. I'm sorry that you misunderstood. You're the one that needs to change your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, your attitudes. But if there's ever going to be an opportunity for us to repair our relationships, for us to heal things, when there's a rift that happens, when there's a rupture that happens in a relationship, it's going to be when we actually take responsibility for our thoughts, actions, and feelings. Have you ever had a situation where you did the math and it was clear that they were like 83.835% of the problem in the relationship? It was their fault. And you're about roughly 16.165, give or take a couple percentage points to be. And so you hold out knowing that, hey, it's 84% of the effort's on them. If they want to fix this, it's on them. And I'll do my 16% of I'll deal with my 16%, but not an ounce more, because they're the ones, they're the problem. And I ain't doing it till I see some effort on their part, till they start doing it. Yeah, I've never done that either. So in the book of Colossians in the New Testament, there's some really profound words that were written to church people about how they interacted with one another, but I think have profound implications for our families and our relationships. Colossians chapter 3, verse 12. This guy, the Apostle Paul, was writing these words. Who wrote this letter? He said, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. And right there we just go, look, you didn't need to say the word if, Paul, all right? It's going to happen. He says, forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Isn't it interesting that he uses the picture, the idea of clothing yourself, of putting on clothes to describe the kind of heart, the kind of attitude that we should have in our relationships? I mean, kind, compassionate, humble, patient, gentle. We think of those things that you either are those things or you aren't. But you choose what you wear. It's an intentional act. You're just not like, how did I put these clothes on? These aren't, anybody ever remember the show Cops? And they would bust somebody, and the guy's like, these aren't my jeans. He's like, well, whose jeans are they? You're just wearing some random dude's pants. So Hansi and I, we love people watching. Part of it's just the psychology of like, you know, Hansi says this all the time. We're at Disneyland. She's like, that person got out of bed today to go to Disneyland, and they thought, you know, I'm going to put on some high heels. I think that's what I'm going to do, right? And I'm always like, well, it's one way to live your life. I mean, just do what makes you happy, I guess. But Paul says, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. The picture that he's painting is that of sinking into a garment, an article of clothing, where it just covers you. It's also this picture, this idea that you wear it so much, not only does it fit you perfectly, and you look great in it, it's your favorite because it's sort of, you know when you got that pair of jeans, and you got like 85 pairs of jeans, but you got that one pair of jeans, and you just know they just feel so good. And the idea that he's painting here is that you choose to do and be these things so frequently that they become your automatic reflex, so that when you put them on so often, they become comfortable, so comfortable and natural that it's just second nature. It's like sinking into your favorite pair of jeans. Of course, the problem is, and I don't know about you, I don't have to try to put on pride and indifference and anger and impatience and selfishness. I just wake up in the morning wrapped up in those things. Sometimes I could go to bed with completely wrapped up in humility and kindness and compassion, but sometimes during the middle of the night, I take all that stuff off and I put on the other stuff, and I wake up in the middle of, in the morning, and all it requires is her waking me up when I don't want to be awake, because she's up all the time. She gets up all the time in the middle of the night, and I'm just like, what are you doing? Why? Why are you awake? And why are you waking me up? You have to choose to take all that stuff off and put on something better. And then he says, bear with each other and forgive one another of your grievances. See, the truth is, all healing, all repair actually begins with grace, because grace leads every time with forgiveness. It leads with forgiveness. In great relationships, healthy, connected families, stay tight-knit over the long haul. They aren't created by people who never hurt each other. Those people don't exist. Those families don't exist. They're created by people who repeatedly choose to clothe themselves with grace and mercy and approach every offense, even the deep ones, every grievance, even the overwhelming ones, with forgiveness and grace. You get to choose how you will respond to their slights and their insults and that rejection and that neglect and the hurt and the betrayal and the indifference and the pain. Choose grace, not because they deserve it. By definition, grace and forgiveness aren't deserved. They're not earned. They can't be earned. They're freely given. He says, forgive as the Lord forgave you. So at the end of the story of Jacob and Esau, this is what happens in Genesis 33. So then Jacob divides his family and divides all his stuff. It says Jacob goes on ahead. As he approached his brother, he bowed down to the ground 7 times before him. An enormous act of humility and honor. Also, kind of a save your skin kind of move. And then Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and threw his arms around his neck and kissed him. And they both wept. So if you haven't read this story, maybe this isn't the way that you imagined it ending. It certainly isn't the way that Jacob expected it to end. Obviously, there's no guarantees. Like, we're not reading this and go like, if you'll just do this stuff, the guy that you betrayed and stole all his wealth and rights and blessing, he will just come running back. And no, there's no guarantees. But I actually can't help but wonder what would have happened if Jacob would have put on humility and kindness and love sooner. If he'd have taken responsibility for what happened between them sooner. And by the way, there are definitely situations that after you've forgiven them, like maintaining the relationship is not possible. And definitely situations where it'd be inadvisable and unwise. It's perfectly okay to forgive them, to bless them, and still maintain that healthy distance, that healthy boundary that we talked about before. That's because forgiveness is about yesterday, and trust is about tomorrow. Forgiveness is actually a financial term. When it appears in the scriptures, it's a financial term. It means to cancel a debt. And just because you canceled the debt doesn't mean that you should automatically extend them more credit again if they haven't changed their spending habits. One of the most helpful things that I ever happened, I was in a coaching call, 10 or 12 years ago on this Zoom call with this guy that's this incredible leader, pastor, and he was talking about church staff, but he said something in that conversation that's been super helpful to me, because forgiveness and reconciliation, in my mind, always go together. They're a package deal. And so I asked him, because we were talking about some of this stuff, I asked him about that. And he said, it's completely okay for you to have relationships that at one time were very active, that they moved from being active to being passive. And I don't know why, but when he said that, it just like gave me all this freedom. Because just because things are resolved, that issue got resolved, doesn't mean that it's going to go back to the way that it was. Doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily be restored or that it should be. And it's okay for a relationship that was once active to just be moved over into the passive category. Doesn't mean you hate them. Doesn't mean you hold something against them. You can bless them and encourage them and want the best for them and pray for them, but you're just not in an active relationship with them anymore. And that's okay. Honestly, I know this stuff is hard. It's messy and it's challenging. And if you actually try to do some of this stuff, you're not going to do it perfectly. You're not. But if you just keep getting up every day and clothing yourself with love and grace and mercy and choosing forgiveness, you and your family will be better. So there's that last part of Colossians chapter 3, that very first verse that we read, that verse 13 says, he says, forgive as the Lord forgave you. See, there's something about the way that we love and forgive one another that doesn't just affect our relationship with one another, it affects our relationship with God. And it's not, the God part of this is not an incidental part of it. In fact, The Apostle Paul starts writing these instructions by describing us this way in Colossians 3:12. He says, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved. I actually thought about just skipping over that part, but when I was thinking about this conversation, I just think it's too important. See, you may think when you read that part, well, he's not talking about me, because I'm a lot of things, but chosen and dearly loved by God, wrong answer. Like, God might love me, but most of the time it just seems like he's kind of tolerating me. And if he's picking teams, I'm pretty sure I'm kind of like the last man standing. And then holy? Yeah, right. Me, holy? This can't be for me because God chooses and loves holy and perfect people. But listen to the list of things that these people that he just wrote this to, listen to the list of things they were struggling with. Literally 7 verses earlier in this same chapter. Sexual immorality, lust, lying, evil desires, greed, anger, rage. I didn't add any of these in. These are all in there. You can read them. Malice, slander, and a vile and filthy way that they talk to each other. That is the list of things that the people that he's now calling God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, were struggling with and guilty of. So which is it? Are they God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved? Or are they just, wow, I don't know if I'd even want to be around these people if this describes them. Are they broken and messy and dirty and sinful? The answer is yes. They're both. See, as broken and messed up as you feel that you are, you're not too broken for God. As broken and messed up as your relationships or your family may feel, it's not too broken for God. It doesn't matter who you are or how you've screwed up in those relationships. God chooses you. He loves you. He's for you. He wants to share his nature and his character with you. That's actually what it means when he uses the word holy, which is incredible. And think about it this way. Without God, the only source for us to have grace for one another and give forgiveness to each other would just be our own humanity. And if that's the case, we're in real trouble. And so I want to end this way this morning and just tell you this. If you're struggling with the pain of something that's been done to you, wondering how you could ever forgive, how you could ever get over it, wondering how it could ever be healed, when someone hurts you, this is what I just want to invite you to do. When your heart is shut down, when it's like that fortified city, you don't need to focus on trying to reopen your heart to that other person. Simply focus on opening your heart to God and inviting him to come in and help you and give you wisdom for that situation. And you know as well as I do, you don't need the other person's permission. You don't need their participation to forgive and begin to heal. You can just start clothing yourself with God's love and his beauty and his truth, his forgiveness, which is why Jesus came. That's why he came. So let's pray together. With your heads bowed, Charlie and Lisette are just going to lead us through a moment of worship and music. And I just want to invite you to have a conversation with God about any or all of this, about that situation, that person, that hurt, that offense, and just allow God to speak to you. Open your heart to him.
'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus, just to take him at his word, just to rest upon his promise, just to know thus saith the Lord. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust him, how I've proved him more and more. Jesus, Jesus. joy and peace. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust him, how I've proved him more and more. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust him more.
God, we bring all of this into your presence. We trust you. The parts that hurt, the parts that are broken, God, the things that we know that there's stuff we can do and we can heal it. We can see the path forward. We know how to fix it. And our pride, or there's maybe some stuff in the way, but God, we're going to clothe ourselves with humility and forgive and choose grace. Lord, would you help us with that? We all have those experiences and moments in all of our relationships every day. And then I also pray, God, for those that they have one of those big things. And the pain and the offense, the betrayal, it's just so big. It's hard to imagine any path forward, even just to forgive. And so, Lord, we desperately need you, and we trust you with those situations. And so, God, we begin this morning just by opening our hearts to you, asking that you would come in and begin to heal, help us take responsibility for the parts that we own. Help us, God, surrender our agenda, how we want it to go, how the control that we want to have, and help us trust you. Would you give us wisdom in how to approach them and what to do next? Because it feels like we've tried everything, and it's just met with hostility and pain. Lord, we need your help. Would you heal our hearts and heal our families and heal our relationships? Would you help us this week to love each other in new and beautiful ways? Thank you for your grace. Thank you for your love. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
South Hills Church, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for watching our service online. Whether you're watching it for the first time or you're watching it again because you enjoyed the service so much from the weekend, I'd like to take a moment and dive into our giving. Every week we give people the opportunity to give back and give to the local church so that God can continue to bless your lives and bless your finances. Here at South Hills, we believe that everything comes from God. We believe that He's the one that chose us and brought us into this world, gave us our gifts and talents and abilities. And I just want you to know that when we give, we are giving back what God has already given to us. If you've ever seen any of our envelopes at a South Hills campus, you'll see on there that it says, every week at South Hills, your generosity is giving people the opportunity to live a better story. And there's a scripture on there in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21 that says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So I want to encourage you today to click down below and set up your giving, whether it's for the first time or whether you're doing reoccurring giving. We have 4 ways to give here at South Hills. 1, you can do it in person at any of our campuses through an envelope. Or 2, you can actually text any amount that you would like to 84321. And the third way is to download our Church Center app. I encourage you to do this one because the Church Center app gives you opportunity to stay connected with our church and your campuses. It's a great tool and resource for you to know what's going on. And the 4th way to give is to give online. You can go to southhills.org/give and you can set up your giving there. Whether you're a guest of our church or whether you are a member of our church, or whether you simply just like to watch our services, I encourage you to trust God with your finances so that He can bless and anoint your finances, and you can be trusting God in this journey of living life to the fullest. I love you, and thank you for watching our online service today.